All right, Phil, it looks like it's slowed down a little bit. So I think we'll continue to let folks in as they appear, but I think you can get started.
Great, thanks, Beth, and thank you all for coming. Part of what I want to emphasize today is that these are indeed, it'll feel like a meeting. It is sort of a town hall, but in essence, the onset of the idea behind these sort of opportunities for all of us is to gather together and to get some of your best ideas and your thinking around some of the topics that I think are going to be critical to the institution as we go forward. So I really appreciate your participation today. I'm going to encourage you to use the chat so that we can record some of those ideas as they come along. And I think the format that I've talked about using is less presentation and more conversation. And so we're going to try and use that as an opportunity to really make valuable use of this time that you're all committing to these series of conversations. And I think what I've been very clear with all of you about the fact that this is a fairly pivotal time for the institution. A number of these topics that we're talking about, it's not as if any of the topics are actually new, but they are new in the sense of how we develop a plan and an approach for the college as we move through some of the crises that we've been engaged in over the last 18 to 20 months, including all the changes at the institution because of the pandemic. I've also wanted to ask that while I think a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss over the next few months are interrelated, I think it's best that if we can stay as focused on sort of the prompts and the questions that I'll be asking of you as we have this conversation, and that we can really use some of the conversation and some of the areas that we have not planned to really talk about today as topics that we could use for the future as we continue to do these monthly conversations. I want to thank James and the FSA Executive Committee again for my conversations with them. I think it was the idea of how do we really reinvigorate and focus the work at FSA on getting the committee work done and the work that has to happen at the college, and that those meetings are really all college meetings with what I would say is very little administrative time taken up during those meetings. So this is really an opportunity for people to volunteer their time to be part of a conversation, and it's very helpful to be able to do this in a way that does not distract from the other things that that are so important to the institution and the work that everyone has to do. So first and foremost, let me thank you for your openness. The agenda as I see it sort of will go like this. I want to provide you with some opening remarks, and just and they're pretty much unprepared, as are true with most things with me. I want to provoke some real thought, and I want to challenge us. I want to tell you some stories and take a couple of minutes to do that. And then I want to share an example of, I think, something that will outline for you some of the challenges that we have, something that's recently happened, let's say, or something that we're presenting, or an effort that's going on at the state that really helps challenge us to be able to respond in a more comprehensive way as an institution. And then most of the time really is for dialogue and questions. And I'm going to tell you that 90% of the questions that people may ask, we may not have the answers to, but it's the asking of those questions. And people may have answers or thoughts on any of the questions that are posed today. So I view this as very, very open and free-flowing. And when we feel like conversation has ended, we can certainly identify some topics that we'd like to cover in the future. I think that would be a valuable way for us to end today, since this is really our first official critical conversation post our professional day focused on race equity just a couple of weeks ago. I also want to sort of apologize in advance. There are, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always other events that are happening. That happens. We're a very busy place. There are speakers that are on campus, there are activities, there are engagement pieces. If you look at your calendar, there's a pretty good chance that there's going to be conflicts for just about anything. But I particularly want to apologize to our SOTL group that has a meeting today from 2:30 on. It's part of their regular schedule. And I was trying to just sort of capture meetings that did not have official FSA committees or actual other responsibilities that were part of the academic calendar. So please let me apologize in advance. And we have some folks with us that may have to jump off at 2:30. You are free to come and go as you would like. But I also want to apologize. There's no way to avoid all conflicts here. And I'm very appreciative that we've developed a schedule that allows us to have some community time on Tuesday and Thursday, and we're all using this as efficiently as we possibly can. So the topic that I really wanted to talk about today is really something that has come from what we are seeing in the changes that we've seen over the last 18 to 20 months. We have always been one college. We have always been one college, and for a while, not always, but in recent history, we certainly have had two campuses, a comprehensive community college with two campuses. Over the last 18 months, we have become, and we have expanded, but we have become a significant portion of offering significant online offerings to our students and online services to those students. And we are in the midst of trying to develop a schedule and approach that will meet all the needs of those students, or at least try and be as comprehensive as we can in trying to meet those challenges. And that is something that we will be talking about next month as we start talking about sort of guided pathways and the academic calendar. But today I want to lay out some thoughts, and I'll start with sort of a story. When the executive committee, when the president's cabinet many years ago, and not all that many years ago, probably about 5 at this point, started talking about something when we started dealing with the transformative education sort of approach to strategic planning, when we were going through significant budget issues and we were asking for input about ways that we might be able to reduce expenditures, increase our operating budget in terms of the revenues that we were receiving here at the institution. People came up with a number of creative things, but I will recall the fact that we tried to come up with some pretty bold ideas. And I think that that's part of what I'm hoping that we'll hear today, is some people who may have some bold ideas. They may not necessarily be practical. They may not be something that we can immediately act on, but I think it's part of the creative energy that everyone that's participating in this Zoom today brings to the conversation. And I think I would say that I would encourage you, and obviously to do this in a respectful manner, to be able to sort of identify things that you wouldn't normally say out loud. And I did that once in a strategic transformation conversation not all that long ago. And we were trying to identify some concerns and some bold steps that we might be able to take during a time of real issue with the budget and with facilities. And I remember saying boldly that we should just sell the Bedford campus. Now, I didn't really mean it when I said it, but I really wanted us to have a conversation as an institution about some of the challenges that we're faced in terms of the fact that we have always worked as an institution to balance our schedule, to provide as much to our students as possible, to have a significant presence both in Bedford and in Lowell, to really have a deeper understanding of how we can bring students back and forth to those campuses, including the establishment of van transportation that takes students back and forth to the campuses to provide a more holistic look at the schedule, and an opportunity for many students who are in Lowell that had never been to the Bedford campus to actually visit and take courses on the Bedford campus, because our schedule was beginning to requiring us to do that. But I asked you to think about this idea of two things that I think we have to discuss today. And one is the fact that we have a lot of physical facilities. We have a lot of buildings, and we have two campuses, and we have a significant online presence. And so therefore, we as an institution are really going to have to figure out together, how do we most effectively and efficiently use those physical resources? And that's part of really what I think the conversation is about today. And I'd like you to begin by thinking about how do we as an institution most efficiently and effectively use the campus facilities that we have. As you can imagine, for our operating budget, in terms of maintaining all of those buildings on 2 campuses, in terms of the expansion of our work, in terms of sort of the personnel that are required, and some of the challenges that we have faced in the past around facilities, even the most recent sort of cancellation of if we've got electricity that goes out on one campus, what do we do in terms of canceling classes? So the idea of all of this is a far more complex equation that has ever been before. We also have a state that has really said to us, and an administration that has said to us, that in order for us to be able to receive any funds from the state for major projects, for capital improvements, we have certain criteria we have to follow. And one of those is being really clear about our efficiency in our use of our classrooms, our efficiency in our use of our physical spaces, the recognition of the fact that things have changed significantly since we've done a lot online, and also partnerships, the idea that we have to be able to partner with a number of different agencies and other higher ed institutions or educational institutions to make better use of facilities going forward. So today's conversation is really about facilities. And in that, one of the things that I believe I talked about during my my process for interviewing for the presidential role was this idea that the college needs to establish a comprehensive master plan. And so some of your comments today will help us in discussing how we might go about doing that. How do we work with a consultant and work with the resources that we have here to develop a master plan? The last time the college developed a comprehensive master plan, it was done for the Bedford campus in 2007. That was 14 years ago. And I can assure you that a tremendous amount has changed in those 14 years. Enrollment, the students that access us, the challenges those students have, our day and evening numbers, what we're doing in embracing an online. So there isn't anything that we've done that hasn't changed in those last 14 years that doesn't sort of allow us to use that 2007 master plan from Bedford. I think at one time in the college's history, there was also some master plan work for the Lowell, the urban campus, Lowell. And I think what is really important for us to talk about today is how do we work together as an institution to make the maximum use of our facilities? How do we do that as efficiently as possible in order to be able to work with the Department of Capital Asset Management to secure major project capital funding? How do we make decisions about what happens in Lowell and what happens in Bedford? Do those campuses serve everyone all the time? Or do we have to think about which academic programs really exist on which of those campuses? To what degree do our facilities play into the colleges and the state's equity agenda in terms of the students that we are able to attract and support at those facilities? Are there external partners that we might want to engage in that may assist us in getting more efficient and effective use of some of those buildings? Are there facilities that we should no longer use because they're deferred maintenance? And Frank will tell you it's like well over $100 million in deferred maintenance, which is a significant issue for an institution of this size. We are an institution that has developed and created work around sort of renovating older facilities. With that comes a significant challenge in terms of our operating budget. So all of these questions are part of sort of the discussion of the institution going forward. I do want to tell you that the most recent activity happened actually this morning, and I want to share some of that with you. In higher education, the capital project request for funds comes every 2 years now. So at one time there was a day where the institution was on a list and they would be the next. We were up for a building in Bedford. We were up for a building in Lowell. And then administration changes and then that process changes. That happens frequently and certainly happened with the most recent administration. And at that time, we have seen an opportunity for the college every 2 years to pitch some changes conceptually to a group of reviewers. And actually, we did that this morning to request a major project capital request. And in that, I think it's a fairly good example of some of the challenges that I think we are facing for the future. And so I want to share some of that with you, and then sort of open it up to your comments. And so this first presentation, there was a team of individuals that were on campus from some academic disciplines, the academic deans, certainly out of the vice president for finance, some work that we've been doing in administration of Colleen Cox's area. There were a number of folks that were involved in some department discussions. But one of the challenges for our institution is how do we meet increasing capacity needs at the institution, and how do we articulate those in a way that can be compelling for the state to be able to support additional projects going forward. And there are restrictions to criteria around this that we have to follow. But I just wanted to share with you as an example of some of the things that we covered today in this pitch, and then open up. I hope that it will provoke. I hope what it will do is it will provoke a lot of question, and it will provoke a lot of conversation about the use of our facilities and the development of a campus master plan, which at this time does not currently exist. Our next time to really pitch for a particular capital project will be in 2023, 2 years from now. And we've been doing this for the last few cycles every couple of years. And I want to be clear with all of you that these are conceptual. It does not mean that this is the actual project that gets sort of funded. All 24 of the institutions that are not UMass components have an opportunity to pitch to DCAM for limited amounts of funding. The last cycle in 2019, I think all 24 institutions again made a pitch for a major capital project. And at that time, only 6 were funded. And so I just want to give you a quick overview of the presentation we did this morning. And I'm going to ask Beth if she will also put in the chat the 4-pager that was part of the sort of promotional piece. And in that, this was a pitch to not only members of DCAM, the executive office, but an opportunity to hear from peer reviewers about the project, which we have a little bit of time to complete some data elements, round out the proposal, and then finally submit it and for the colleges, on the college's behalf for the future. This has been in conversation, I would say, both on the ground for the last couple of months here at the institution. And I think some of this will not be a surprise to any of you, but I think certainly departments that have been engaged with this conversation with their dean will have a sense of what we're doing. So what we do know is that we are at capacity in a number of our STEM-related lab, and that we have programs that are in Bedford and in Lowell, with the conversation about where is the best place for those programs to be, where's the best synergy for that to happen. So with this came this proposal for an MCC STEAM exchange. And I'm just going to walk you through some of these slides fairly quickly, and then we'll open this up to questions. So as with any pitch, we started talking about that everything we do at the institution for our facilities is about our students. And this particular in Kojo Bempa, who is an electrical engineering student, is just a pure example of that. We shared that with him about his interest in STEM. And then we'll just keep moving. Next slide. We talked a little bit about the strength of the work that we have done in both STEM and arts education, and about the curriculum, the kinds of course options that we have, the pathways from high school to a baccalaureate degree, and of course, our focus on equity. Next slide. Talked a little bit about the new president and a vision for the future, about how we need to continue to build on strong partnerships, how we need to continue to work on innovative academic models to prepare high quality and diverse students. We talked about a building, using an existing building in Lowell to create this STEAM exchange to respond to the future of work, which is a report from the state. and also to create synergies between sort of the health and the arts program that are already located in Lowell in specific buildings, and more importantly, to increase classroom capacity in the STEM and arts area. And we'll talk about in a moment which of those are. So this pitch was particularly for the Pollard building, which you will see in this rendition here. And we talked about its proximity to 6 existing buildings. We do not currently own the Pollard building. It is owned by the Lowell Middlesex Academy Charter School. And so we are talking about the acquisition of that building. We are now renters in that facility, and the charter school owns the building. We're going to try and flip that so that the college owns the building and that the charter school is a tenant in that building, which would give us access to a significant amount of square footage that we could redevelop in that building, thanks to the state making an investment in our doing so. So we were trying to explain to them exactly how an urban campus works and what buildings are close to each other, including the Academic Arts Center, our 2 critical buildings on Middle Street, Talbot and Derby, the fact that we've been in the Pollard Exchange for a long time now as renters, probably for at least probably 8 or 9 years. And then of course its closeness to the Cowan Center, which is sort of in many ways a central part of the urban part of this campus here in Lowell. And I talked a little bit about the proven track record that we have, the most recent dental clinic and biotech renovations that were completed in 2020, and the fact that we have a tremendous amount of experience of taking older buildings and converting them into gorgeous spaces, such as the new biotech lab that you see there, the performing arts space. We've done a remarkable job in the city of Lowell of taking buildings that are critically important to the city of Lowell, and the Pollard building is one of them. It was the birthplace of UMass Lowell, and there's more history there that we could share with you, but that we wanted to pitch the fact that we have done this work before. And then so we've identified sort of this idea of a STEAM exchange, and we talked about the challenge of the aging properties that we have, but most importantly, how do you maintain a historic property? How much we have already invested in the building and infrastructure that's gone on over the last, I want to say, 8 or 9 years. And also this idea of the fact that there's a challenge in the aging properties that we have in Bedford. So when I talk about $100 million in deferred maintenance, these buildings will look very familiar to many of you. There's Bedford House on the right. I don't know how many times we've talked about sort of how old and ineffective Bedford House is, and there's South Academic as well in terms of its age and the fact that it would take more money to renovate both of those buildings. So when we look at deferred maintenance, when we look at the age of those buildings, and when we talk to architects, everything we're learning tells us that it would cost us more to renovate those buildings than it would to really tear the building down and start even with a new building, or leave the buildings there for other functions. But as we look at deferred maintenance, it is one of the requirements of the state that as we ask for any new capital project, that we must reduce our deferred maintenance expenses with the state. And then I think what we talked about after that is sort of the proposal priorities, and then we'll stop here, Beth, and then we'll sort of put up the 4 pages so people can flip through that. But these are exactly what the state is looking for when we have any kind of proposal. We have to be able to be very clear about how we can expand and deepen programmatic collaborations. That is, how do we expand and deepen our connection with Lowell High School? How do we expand and deepen our connection with LMAX? How do we use the proximity of the Pollard building to the University of Massachusetts at Lowell in a number of very specific programs? How do we also align these investments? So if the state is going to invest in a building for us and helping us renovate a building, then how does that really align with the Workforce Skills Cabinet industry priorities that have to do with STEM and in work in the arts and communication area? How do we develop flexible and innovative program delivery models to minimize space requirements? So that's how do we look at and gauge the utilization of our classroom? We have the capacity to look at every single classroom on both campuses and identify a percentage of utilization. and what is the maximum amount of that utilization. And as we've seen evening school decline, we have also seen the utilization of our facilities decline, and that makes perfect sense with declining enrollment. But how do we become more efficient and more effective as an institution using some of the strategies that I've already mentioned? And the last is the idea to improve student access and outcomes. This has to do with the equity agenda, but along with that, incorporating best practices learned from COVID-19 on the future of work and learning. And that has to do with what are we offering, what's online, what are we offering that is hybrid, what are we offering that's face-to-face, and how are our academic programs changing in the nature of the way they deliver what all of you are delivering in terms of your services and the academic content in our programs. And you'll note that we identified here that there's a clear alignment with MCC's strategic directions that we're currently working on to complete our strategic plan. So let's just open this up for, and Beth will drop in the chat the other piece, but I'm showing this as an example of sort of the opportunities that come to us periodically as an institution, how we have those conversations with our board of trustees, how we have those conversations internally. This is no different, or it has slight difference than a 2019 pitch that was made for this particular building and its contingency to the other buildings that are in Lowell, the importance of the equity agenda and our access to partners in Lowell, the challenge of articulating partners in the Bedford area, but that's part of a conversation that we can have as well. And I think that this is, as I would say, just a clear example of how we're trying to articulate programs that are currently potentially in Bedford that may better be served in Lowell by their connection with UMass Lowell and with Lowell High School, which is part of the criteria we've had to sort of address. So I'm only throwing this out there as an example of work that's being done at the institution. And I also throw it out as an example of the fact that we have to have some critical conversations about how we use our physical facilities and how do we get creative about the use of those facilities, and how do we begin to make some determinations about sort of what academic programs are on what campus and to what percentage are those online and face-to-face. And I think these are all things that we're facing right now, but this will lead us into our next critical conversation next month about the academic schedule. But I'd really like to open up now and ask the question, if people have had thoughts, ideas that you have mentioned in the past, things that you've been thinking about the use of our facilities and the efficient use of our facilities, how others could use those facilities and whether or not that would be revenue generating. Where are we in terms of our thoughts around the two campuses and how we best serve students, and your own experience of experiencing either one of these campuses and the challenges that come with being in an urban environment and in a suburban environment. So I'm going to open that up from there, and then I would love to hear your comments about your thoughts about our facilities, the direction we need to go in, and some of your creative ideas about facilities and how we might embark on a process to develop a master plan for the college that will lead us into the future. So you can certainly just speak up, raise your hand, whatever you feel is easiest for you, and use the chat as you would. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Phil. Hi,
You wanna
everybody.
start?
Great to see you. Yeah, I'd love to, because I just attended the Adobe Max conference, and there was a really inspirational presentation that I think is aspirational, perhaps for us. A school in Paris that combines engineering and the arts and design, where students collaborate to bring complex projects to fruition, right? By students
Like
working
solving
together.
real world problems, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It really made me think about the possibilities. You know, the design and arts world is changing dramatically, and the field is becoming one where students need to work on teams, multidisciplinary teams, right, to create new social media platforms and new ways of delivering content and new ways of connecting people. And this seems like a perfect opportunity for us to think about how could we work together with our STEM partners to create something like that here.
And Jan, I want to say that you were a plug or a plant for this, but you were not.
No, I'm not.
But I'm really glad that you spoke first, because if people look at the 4-pager, we are talking about exactly that. How do we co-locate the communication, art, and design department that has now sort of brought itself together in graphic design, studio arts, all of the artwork, and the communications, the tremendous work that's been done in media, multimedia, all under Jen Bauer in a consolidated department. A very exciting and bold move that was made recently. And in this building, we are talking about exactly that: creating space for engineering, computer science and IT, communications, art, and design, all to have sort of those kinds of common spaces, maker spaces, laboratories, and opportunities for synergy that might create the programs of the future. And those are listed as well. So I would love to get the name of the school in Paris. I don't know that we'll look like that school, but I would love to see the interior design of some of those spaces, because I think it would be really inspirational as we think and go beyond concept to what happens in the Pollard building, to the reality of what we would design if we were ever, officially funded by the state to do this kind of work. But I will say, Jen, what I love about what you said is the fact that some of this is something that we have to wait for a physical facility to happen, but some of it can and already has started to happen with communication. And I encourage the conversation with Arlene and with your deans about bringing some departments together to having conversations about new and emerging opportunities from the growth of sort of some of these connections that you have laid out, Jan, because they're exactly along the lines of what we've been thinking about this in this new facility. And again, it's a conceptual outline. It's detailed enough based on an architect, but in the end, it would require, if we were to receive funding, significant support from the communication, arts, design, and the STEM faculty working very closely together about what they'd want those spaces to look like and how you might create that kind of collaboration. So thank you for that plug.
Okay. I'll get you some more info.
Perfect. Other thoughts based on what you saw, what you've heard?
Phil, in the chat, someone had posted about building a dorm or putting housing for students in Lowell as an option. And
Yeah.
Joanna has mentioned or has asked about possibly renting some of the buildings for long-term rentals in Bedford.
Sure. Let's I don't know which we want to tackle first, but I think they're both great ideas and ones that we have considered in the past, but have to seriously consider in the future. So quite frankly, let's talk about residence life. And there are community colleges across the nation that have residence halls on their campuses or close to their campuses. It has provided significant growth. And, oftentimes we've talked about sort of the remarkable programs that we have at the college that are leaders in some of the statewide curriculum, and that we would be able to attract, much like we do for our health programs, students from across the state in a number of programs if we had a place for them to live, right? I mean, that's what universities do. And in essence, that's some of what we've piloted over at the ICC, the Inn and Conference Center at UMass Lowell. Now, there's a building it would be great to be able to acquire because it would allow us for some additional flexibility and an ability to attract people not only from across the state, but out of the state as well for that residence hall. It would allow us to attract, in Maryland, we've talked about this a number of times, international students, although that has been a challenge during COVID times. But the idea of residence halls, dorms, is one that I think is creative and one that we have to consider for the future. And I'll tell you, they come with challenges and they come with expenses, right? Because you have to be able to create a living, learning environment that has professionals that can help support students in that living environment. We've learned that even from the floors that we've taken over at the ICC as part of the reserve placement process. And that is part of what we've been doing with UMass Lowell for a little while. And we've learned a great deal. And in fact, if you do a little Googling and you get some idea, those living learning environments are oftentimes, there are classes that are being held right in those residence halls so that students get connected to their academic program. And they're brought together as a cohort, as a group. So it creates the kind of community that's so important to the work that many of you do in your academic programs and your department. The idea of how much UMass Lowell wants to hang on to the ICC is an interesting conversation. It's a conversation I've already had with the current chancellor, and one I think we're going to have with the chancellor in the future. When you think about where the ICC is located right next to our building and what has happened there and what they've developed as a fully functioning residence hall, along with a hotel that still has a couple of floors that allows visitors, our own visitors that come to professional day have stayed there. Our accrediting bodies that have come and stayed here for site visits have stayed there as well. So I think this idea of the discussion of an actual look creatively at community colleges across the country that have expanded to residence halls and what that might mean for enrollment and growth would be important both for domestic students and for international students. So thanks for bringing that up. The second point that I think people, and Joanna, I think you mentioned this, is the idea of renting facilities. So what I would say is, and I'll let Frank talk a little bit about this if you would, Frank, because the challenge here is if the push is from the state for us to reduce deferred maintenance, in other words, everything it costs us to operate some of these older buildings, then other options may be better for us in terms of the tagline of how much we have in terms of deferred maintenance. But the other piece is that, you know, we're excited about the possibility that if we are able to move some of these programs and we take some of these buildings offline, there are two options with those buildings. One is demolition, right? Which means that, and that comes with its own climate challenges in terms of what the state is attempting to do with some of the facilities that exist across all of the universities and community colleges and the UMass system. But the idea of if we have renters, then we have to be good landlords, right? We have to make sure that the facilities are in great shape. It still comes with a significant amount of expense in doing that. But a lot of schools, and I came from Cape Cod and from CCRI, where we rented those facilities for a number of occasions over summers for summer programs, with partners that we had in the neighborhoods. We rented out, you know, all sorts of theater facilities at other places. At Cape Cod, they regularly rent out their theater. I think also at Cape Cod is the first process where I saw where there was an RFP that was sent out to four-year institutions saying to anybody that wanted to offer courses on the campus that they could do that, but there was a process and they had to contribute to the library and they had to pay rent and they had to sort of be good stewards of the physical facilities. But, you know, the opportunity to have some innovative four-year institutions in either Bedford or Lowell, especially where we've lost a lot of our evening population, would be really interesting. Now, of course, the evening population has diminished in a number of places. It's not just in community colleges because students are really gravitating to online. But the concept of rentals is not unfamiliar to that. Colleen has really established those kinds of, we have policies, we have practices, we have agreements. We have in the past done that. We've actually done whole programs on either campus before. So,
Phil, I was
Joanna,
thinking,
you want to follow up?
yeah, I was thinking even more like, not like we do the events, you know, a summer camp or the quilter show or this space, but like a building, an entire building.
Yep.
And maybe a company or a business or somebody wants space, needs workspace, and thinking that perhaps that revenue would cover some of that deferred maintenance. So it would be sort of a partnership, like maybe a graduated rental scheme where they come in at a lower rate, let us get some of the stuff up to snuff, and then it builds like that. So I was thinking more of a long-term lease situation.
Yeah, and in fact, we have some interesting agreements. Frank just has finished. We worked on an agreement with the VA for some specific parking spaces in that larger lot that's over closer to the VA. And I think we're generating income from that. Frank, I mean, how many spaces have we sold them?
60 spaces, 60 spaces, and, you know, will yield approximately $100,000 a year.
Right.
Yeah.
And, that the idea of, in Bedford, it's a little challenging where that parking lot is because it's abutted by a number of neighbors that don't want to see a lot of development in that particular parking lot. But the idea that we can rent those spaces, and we've talked with the VA and to some degree with the town of Bedford of like, if we did have available space, are there offices? Are there teaching facilities? Is there anything in what we would have instead of our vacant or what would become our vacant buildings of value to them? Or are there spaces that might be available for them to run some of their events? So I think you're on the right track with this, Joanna, because I think the idea is we have to look at every possible aspect of revenue as we start to see the crunch and the change in terms of face-to-face and online learning, and even just sort of the fact that we are now all not occupying offices 5 days a week, including our professional staff with the new telework policy. The world of work has changed, and so our use of those facilities will change with it. Rob?
Hi, Phil. As everyone knows, I've been at the Bedford campus in Middlesex for a very long time. So there's a certain amount of sadness that I have about what has happened to the Bedford campus in terms of it just frankly being run down and worn out. And it seems really a daunting challenge, as you described, in some cases better to just tear a building down even than redo it. I wish I had something brilliant to offer in terms of suggestion, but I did want to express that there's probably a lot of sadness for a lot of us about the possibilities for the Bedford campus, because even the classrooms they're in some cases too small. They don't have the technology. In terms of other possible uses too, just to throw a little note of reality into that, I come over by these office parks over there in Technology Park, and those are not being used to full capacity, as a lot of office parks are not, that recently went through a lot of rebuilding in the last decade. And so they probably got some very nice, virtually brand new great facilities for companies to use. And so what do we have to offer? So anyway, not to be too much of a Debbie Downer, but
No, I think, Rob, I don't think there's anyone that's on this. I mean, many of us have spent, where my original office was. It's where corporate and community ed is over in Trustee's House. And it's a beautiful old building, although now we have geothermal, so you can sit in there and you can feel the vibration from what generates our electricity and our heat. But I agree with you that there is some melancholy that comes with talking about the future, because I think it means that we are at a time when, and many of you were there, Rob, you certainly were there, when we saw really skyrocketing enrollments and that we were using any available space as a classroom, right? Remember the days of 12,000 students and the sort of insanity of what was in terms of the last enrollment burst, and was the largest enrollment burst in the college's history as well. And literally faculty and staff literally fighting over available spaces to run classes. I mean, that was the past. And in fact, when we think about sort of how the Bedford campus grew up and the use of those facilities, we know that Henderson Hall has far greater classroom capability in terms of the facility than what we have in South or North Academic. So some of this is about not having support from the state to keep up with that deferred maintenance. And that's, I would say, not just a community college problem, that's a universal problem in the system. And I would also say, and Frank, you can certainly, argue with me, but I think as well, that nationally, deferred maintenance is one of the largest issues for colleges across the nation, especially those of us who have aging facilities. And what I would say is our facilities staff and the institution has done a remarkable job of keeping our facilities clean and keeping them really in as much of a good shape as we possibly can. But there isn't any of those classrooms that couldn't use significant renovation as part of what has to happen. And you're right, Rob. I think that with what we've seen in industry in the area, the availability of business space that's vacant at this time, we do not look as attractive as some of those spaces. But there are possibilities for public-public or public-private sort of arrangements that can be made. And I think we have to sort of look at exploring those. But most importantly, I think it's important to consider that we have to figure, how do we consolidate the use of those buildings that are really very, very high functioning, and classrooms that are, how do we really renovate and assist the development of classrooms in Henderson Hall? How do we keep Henderson Hall as a central figure in classrooms? How do we think about where do we use the spaces that are most conducive to what students would like to see? Because remember, we're trying to attract students to the institution as well. But I think all of us, Rob, feel that sadness that you talk about. I think why these conversations are difficult is because I think we oftentimes hope for the institution that we would come back to where we were. But I think we all know that there's too many significant changes where that will really be the case. And so part of this is the challenge is figuring out, how do we maximize the use of the facilities that we have and do that in a very efficient way. But I do appreciate your thought about, and it is true, there are office parks all around us, but I still think there are partners that would like to be part of being in an educational environment on a campus that looks as beautiful as Bedford.
Phil, I just want to go through some of the chats that were posted just to make sure that these don't get lost. Kim Morrissey has mentioned, what about bringing in a culinary arts training space, especially given the staffing shortages that restaurants and hotels are facing. And on the same line with food, there were a couple mentions of renting our cafeteria spaces to somebody who can come in and use them, but then also provide food for our students.
Actually, Kim, I wish you'd come on and talk about this, because I don't know where you are, if you're off camera or whatever, but I think this is such a great conversation. I just recently had this conversation with Colleen. We've had a conversation in cabinet. I've been having conversations with UTech. As you all know, it has been very challenging for us to get a vendor that will come in with the percentage and number of students that we currently have on campus to provide food. I mean, they're so used to being in a full purpose sort of environment where, and I would say that our vendors in the food service have, I don't want to say they've suffered, but it's not been an easy process. And Colleen can attest to that as we go through and try and identify a food vendor that does a really good job for a campus that has, 2 kitchens. But you're absolutely right. We have to find other solutions to the best way to use those kitchens. And I think the idea of using those kitchens now, and I think we have to check into some of the issues, Kim, around liability, what kind of responsibilities we would have to have, but the idea of a culinary arts training space. And, for how long, Kim, have we fought to try and find a kitchen? And here we now have 2 of them, and they're on our own campus, right? So all the times that we've looked around at other kitchens, using UTech, finding other partners, but I'm thinking about UTech as a potential vendor of our food service as a partnership, and have had conversations with Greg. And I think we have another follow-up conversation later in November about a number of partnerships. And that is one that's hot on the ticket. But I guess, Kim, the question is, a lot of schools have programs that are robust enough to have their culinary arts program serve as the cafeteria. Or is there a way that we could expand our culinary arts program so that at least our students could get sandwiches and some needed nourishment while they're on campus for those that are on campus? And I think it wouldn't be as big an operation as feeding 4,000 students on any given day, but I think a sort of a grab and go opportunity. And, between the pastries work that you're doing in some of your courses and some of the other opportunity, setting something up as an experiment to do that, now is the time that we don't have a vendor and a contract that we have to fight to be able to do those things. So, all right, Kim's not taking me up on joining us, but I think she'll keep writing in the chat that if she's had to go elsewhere. But it's an important point. I just made some notes about this whole idea of a culinary arts training program. Judy Burke has a million ideas as always, so I can't wait to hear what Judy has to say.
So anyway, I'm obviously excited by all of this. And saddened to think that some buildings could potentially be demolished. But some of the things that I've heard from different constituent groups, one being UMass Lowell, they have always been interested in trying to have a southern tier presence to compete with Northeastern. That could be something, Phil, as you're talking to the university, that may be something to pass by them to see if they would be open to renting space in the Bedford campus, because they had expressed an interest to me at one point about that.
Yeah, Judy, I just want you to know, I did have just recent conversation with Joe Hartman, their provost, and Julie Chen. I did talk about the fact that we would be open to those kinds of considerations, or sort of a UMass Lowell South. And I think that they are, as you know, because of what's going on with COVID, trying to sort of figure out what's happening for them is the decline in their continuing ed and their evening programs as well. And I think online has changes as some of the dynamic of what people want. But for UMass Lowell to have an office in Bedford and to offer and have a couple of classrooms, an opportunity to offer courses would be terrific for a number of our students, for their convenience, but also for the institution. And again, it may not be a lot of rental income, but I think it would be a great partnership that would really round out some of our offerings. So thank you, Judy, on the list. What else you got?
So also along those lines, Mass Hire is interested in renting out space potentially, Metro Southwest Workforce Board. So that could be something that we could look into. I don't know how much space, but that I know at least they'd like an office. Also doing some kind of a focus group with commercial realtors in the area, Gutierrez in particular, where they own so much of the property around the Bedford campus, and the economic development directors from Burlington, Bedford, Billerica, to see what they're hearing from employers and from companies in the area, and how they look at property and facilities from a completely different lens. And as they're talking to employers, could there be any sort of transference for the property that we have to what they're looking for? Training, daytime training space. This has always been, it's a catch-22. Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
But, daytime training space, we have never had that luxury on our campus. Other campuses have, where you can take advantage of people who are on Section 30 who have to go to school 20 hours a week. That is something that we could potentially investigate and look at and see, the pros and cons of that. Incubator space, again, talking to UMass Lowell and what they've done over at 110 Canal.
Right.
Is there some transference of, and I know all about that. And then what you had mentioned, Phil, the daytime office rental, that was something that I had visited a place in Woburn that did that sort of co-working space rental. That I think is an excellent idea. And there are a lot of those types of companies in Burlington and Woburn. And I'd love to get a handle on whether or not they're, if they're successful, they're cropping up all over the place. So that could be, carve out some amount of space for that.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Judy, that you mentioned in this is, and I think Rob has tapped into the fact that we may not be the right space for everybody, but there are certain partners that would be very interested in a presence on the campus, because I think it would assist them in their own outreach. Like when I think about Metro Southwest and I think about Mass Hire or some of the other nonprofit agencies, the opportunity. I mean, I just had this conversation with Jonathan Crockett the other day about CTI and Lowell. We're really trying to get CTI to have a presence on our Lowell campus because they can provide really detailed SNAP benefits and opportunities for our students for essential needs. I know they're right down the street, but the opportunity to have them here on campus, and again, that's not a rental, but I think it's something for us to think about is as we're looking at space, how do we really, if we're not going to receive rent, how do we receive the benefit of an expanded partnership that's really going to benefit the institution in more dimensions than just financially. So great
Right.
ideas, Judy.
Like the Small Business Assistance Center, the SBA, the SCORE, to support some of our entrepreneurship efforts. So all good stuff to think about.
Excellent.
Bill, some other themes that we have in the chat are around lots of chatter about this idea of an incubator or a business center where we rent out office space and provide folks with access to technology, printers, equipment, et cetera. Valerie Morse asked about partnering with Voc schools, and Haley Sugarman has posted about expanding our HiFlex opportunities on campus. And then early childhood daycare has come up multiple times.
Great. Well, a couple of things I'm going to continue to encourage you. These are called critical conversations. So if you want to speak out loud about it, no one's going to shoot you down for your idea. We're trying to be as creative as possible. So please come on camera so we can have a conversation, because I think sometimes just getting a burst of an idea in the chat is great, but an opportunity for us to think about it more comprehensively, and you won't have to listen to me as much. I mean, I'm trying to respond to all of the comments in the chat, but I will say about the incubator space and the business center is we would have to identify space or renovate space that would be attractive enough for that kind of operation. And that we'd have to think seriously about what would be the investment to do that. What would we have to accomplish in order to make that an attractive sort of option for a number of people. So, but I still love the idea. I will tell you that I'm spending a lot of time in vocational schools. I was just over at Minuteman the other day. Judy and her staff has a follow-up with some folks from Minuteman in their evening school. We're looking at possibilities of partnering with a significant number of their evening programs and talking about associate degree completion programs as a pilot of how we might be able to work. And we have accreditors that we have to deal with that. But anybody who's talking about vocational schools, I'd like to know more about what you mean by that. I mean, I have my own concept of how we might be able to utilize local vocational schools to expand enrollment opportunities and to partner better around a lot of technical programs. But I'm curious about what the thoughts are. And then, Hallie, I'm going to jump over to you because your hand was up first, and then we'll come back to Valerie if you would. But Hallie, speak more about your discussion about HiFlex.
Okay, thanks. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to just come at this from a slightly different angle. And I'm not one to talk about real estate and what works and what doesn't work. That's not my background, but I really am coming back to thinking about something we've talked about the last couple of years, which is meeting our students where they are. And to me, I start thinking about how we can best use our physical space to meet our students' needs. And I think we're acknowledging the number of online classes. We're acknowledging that our students are taking classes in different modalities. We're not ever going to get away from this Zoom reality we live in now. So I would love to see the support go behind utilizing the buildings that we have and building technology space for students. That is, we have wonderful computers in our libraries that our students can access, but that's obviously only accessible during the hours the library is open. So is there a way to expand on-campus technology access for students who are taking our courses, whether they be on a Zoom or in an asynchronous class, but they just need that space, they need access to printers, and how can we better utilize our space for that? And that also provides student gathering spaces. It doesn't have to be just in a classroom, but other areas where students can have that technology. Again, acknowledging we're meeting our students where they are now. And to me, that ties into what's in the chat right now about CTI. And so maybe that means when they come onto campus, they also have access to food and housing services or whatever else they're there. But if the campus becomes a place where they can get their classwork done in a safe environment in different hours, I think that'll sort of meet that student need. Study hub, there you go, something like that. And then I sort of to dovetail into the question about renting outer space, renting our space out is
well, you know, if we can make money from renting outer space, I'm up for doing it, Hallie.
I'm into that too. So I think my biggest concern would be that I know that we have a lot of trouble meeting our own infrastructure and technology needs. And if we're suddenly, inviting other businesses to do business on our campus, I worry about the burden on us to sustaining that and to sustaining those partnerships when we sometimes struggle to meet our own needs in those areas. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes along with all of these ideas, Hallie, you're absolutely right, is what what is the infrastructure that is required for us to be successful? The last thing the college needs to do is start offering up rental spaces or opportunities for others when we can't manage it, whether it be expanded Wi-Fi or literally just the coordination of that work. I mean, some campuses, I've been on campuses where we've had conference coordinators, people who are responsible for doing that, which is another opportunity for revenue as well, is the idea of how do we think about during the time that we're not, and believe me, there's not too many times when we're not using our own space, right? I mean, we're running literally throughout the year. We have 1 week that we're down that we don't offer classes, and that's between Christmas and New Year's. And I'm not kidding you, that is literally the only week that classes are not being offered. But I do think that, Hallie, your point about we have learned a lot during the pandemic. I mean, Colleen and many others who have been engaged in this, our IT staff will tell you that we've been trying to find that sort of campus hub, that space for students to go in between classes, or they've got an online class and then they've got a face-to-face class and they've got to have a solution to that. And we have utilized some of those spaces. What we have done, though, is that means that we have, and we have to be very cautious about this, we've had to take some classrooms offline in order to be able to do that. But I think if we took a cold, hard look at the schedule, and we'll learn from the scheduling over the next couple of semesters as we have more face-to-face and hybrid and high flex opportunities, we'll get a better sense of where our students are clustered, and at the same time, what classrooms are getting not maximized use. And then at that point, we might be able to address the kind of issues that you're talking about, because I think you're absolutely right. If we are going to have face-to-face opportunities and we are going to have students having mixed, sort of schedules, and they will and they do, then we're going to have to figure out how do we best accommodate those students and use the space for that particular purpose. Thank you. Valerie.
Hi. So I recommended connecting with the extended learning opportunities. So the Voc schools, as well as the regular traditional high schools, are building in credit for extended learning opportunities that may tie into connecting with someone in banking, or connecting with someone in marketing or management, or shadowing someone in financial aid, et cetera. And so I don't see this necessarily as a money maker per se, but it may assist with some of our labor needs while building community relationships and connecting with those high school students so that they see us as being value added and may become future students of ours.
Yeah, you are speaking my language, Valerie. In fact, I just had a great conversation with the superintendent, like I told you, over at Minuteman. And if you have not been over to see the absolutely gorgeous new building that was built by the state for Minuteman, I was drooling the entire time that I had a tour. The theater for a vocational school is extraordinary in terms of the space. The way that they've thought about sort of where the electrical plugs are in their machining shop, how they've developed all of the use of their space as multiple space. But I mean, when you build a new building, you get to do that. But one of the things I'll tell you that was really interesting is that the superintendent there and I have talked a lot about, specifically about evening school, because as you know, the vocational schools not only run their programs during the day, but they're also doing, as we've talked about, and Judy knows, as we just had a conversation with Mass MEP the other day, that they also run afternoons programs in innovation pathways for some of the other high schools. And then in the evening, they're running their own very lucrative programs. So how do you compete with people who have all the facilities, have all the state support, and at the same time are charging adults $13,000 to complete a machining program, right? Far in excess of what we would charge. So where's the business model in this that allows us to work together? And I think I will tell you, and I mentioned this the other day at a meeting, that when I came here many years ago, we had a number of programs at the college. Many of you will remember. I mean, Camille will probably remember this. People who have been around for a long time in admissions know that we had programs that really started off at those vocational schools, technical programs, and then the students came here and completed their general education courses. And the accreditors, NEASC at the time, basically put a stop to that. In essence, you have to identify that that institution is is a site And I think that that's directly a possibility. I mean, the idea of identifying Minuteman High School and their evening program as a potential Middlesex site that could be accredited based on its facilities and what we could teach. I mean, we're doing a lot of work with concurrent enrollment in these schools with a lot of the gen ed courses anyway, thanks to the tremendous work that Ellen Grandine and all of the department chairs and the deans have done. So we have a foothold in a lot of these schools. But in the vocational schools, imagine the opportunity that you could complete your entire associate's degree right there at Minuteman in the evening. And if we could find a business model that would benefit the vocational school along with benefiting the college in their enrollment. I mean, the one thing that we have that the vocational schools don't have is the authority to grant credit towards a certificate and associate's degree. So how do we partner? And so, like I said, this conversation with the superintendent at Minuteman left us with a lot of great conversations and a lot of follow-up. But I'm going to promise you that we're going to try and expand, and I hate to use the term exploit, those communications and those partnerships with the vocational schools as much as we possibly can to expand enrollment. Because I know, Valerie, that's the kind of thinking you're doing about how those connections can help us with enrollment. It's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Karen?
Karen,
Sorry.
maybe I'm mute.
Yeah,
There you go.
I'm here. Sorry. My doctor's office just called. Can you give me 1 minute?
Absolutely. We'll jump to the next person. You just jump back in.
Okay,
Joanna?
Phil, while we still have Haley's great comments in our minds, I just wanted to go to the chat. Noreen had mentioned that we also need the same sort of technology support in HighFlex for our student support and engagement services as well, not just for classrooms.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, first of all, we would have loved to expanded what we wanted to do. We had a great plan for what was going to happen with the innovation hubs for faculty for training on both campuses. The furniture is there. Those rooms look terrific. The problem is with the supply chain, we can't get any of the equipment. And so our challenge is that we wanted to be much farther along with what we were doing with HighFlex as a pilot in a number of classrooms, but we were also going to be putting HighFlex in shared spaces, such as sort of the assembly room, the courtroom, and potentially some other spaces like the cafeteria. I mean, the issue is we can't get the technology to do the basic foundational X number of classes that we had identified on both the Bedford and Lowell campus. We can't even complete the technological impact of what was supposed to happen for the training of faculty and staff in those two innovation hubs in the libraries. So I think what I would say is that is certainly in our future. And I think HighFlex is an option. I know Hallie's been really, planned her whole program around that being available. And we're challenged because we have not been able to get the equipment to move that forward. But a lot of folks in the student engagement area know the opportunity to have students who are on campus, but also students that are at home in a form of engagement that's merged through HighFlex is going to be a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I think about sort of how the multicultural centers and the sort of other support areas, including some of the tremendous engagement work that we do, that HighFlex would give us a lot more flexibility. Again, we've tried to work with a vendor that's been incredibly helpful in terms of maintaining that. IT has been on top of this as well. And as soon as we can get those HighFlex spaces and get the equipment in to do it, we absolutely are going to see a change in the way we can deliver not only classroom, but curriculum and opportunities outside of the classroom as well. So well said.
Phil, Jillian posted in the chat that she would love to see UMass Lowell in Bedford, but that she would also like to have other bachelor's options for our students. So not just UMass Lowell. We used to do things like that previously. Maybe we can revisit it.
Yep. And Jillian, I think that the idea around that is, do we want to send out an RFP to a number of campuses that they might respond to? But some of the personal connections that we're using. So for example, Arlene and the deans and I have been meeting with a number of smaller for-profit institutions and institutions that are private, which have often given our students tremendous benefit of having the excess beyond 60 credits. So for example, we just had a great conversation with William James College in Newton, Tremendous college that does significant work in mental health and psychology. They're very interested in potentially having some space and offering some classes on our Bedford campus. They also want to provide scholarships to our students. They're very interested in sort of the scholarship pathway for students of color. They're working very hard in their own agenda to identify mental health workers, clinical psychologists, and creating a pathway from associates to bachelor's to master's. But I think there are a lot of privates that may want to work with our spaces. Boston Architectural College is another that we've recently had a conversation with. And all of this aligns with the strategic plan because it's very specific and interesting pathways that students want to be able to address. And UMass Lowell is not their only option, but UMass Lowell could be a viable option. And I think it would help students feel a lot more comfortable with some evening classes or late afternoon classes offered by the university as students are making the transition into this program. So we certainly can continue, Jillian, to have some conversations with the provost and the deans over there at UMass Lowell about their interest in the Bedford campus and that southern tier. But I think we're going to have to be pretty creative about talking to a number of our private partners as well, because I think, like I said, there are smaller private colleges out there that are really struggling to survive. And never before have I seen the interest in transfer from community colleges. And we're talking about transfer where somebody will take 72, 90 credits towards a baccalaureate degree. Think about the money that saves our students. And then they've only got 30 credits to complete in a very intense program at that four-year school. So it's the kind of articulation agreements that Ellen and the deans and I and Arlene have been talking about, and how we're going to explore some of those. And once we build some of those, we've done it with nursing, we've done it in a number of areas. So we certainly have the template of how to do it. We're just trying to woo some of these private institutions that are interested in having conversations. And I brought them on campus. We've had lunch. We started to talk about how we develop that kind of articulation, but that partnership, and they get to see some of our physical facilities here, both in Lowell and Bedford, and will be intrigued by the possibilities that, you know, students may not want to drive all the way down to Newton, but the opportunity to take evening classes with a particular small college may be an option. But it has to be a business model that's going to work for them, and we have to schedule them in, you know, in a number of classes that have been renovated or in good shape as well. So, Jill?
Hi, everybody. Jill Keller, English department. I just wanted to say verbally what some of us were saying in the chat, because it wasn't a question per se, but I wanted people to hear this and to get an answer from you, Phil, about including the student voice. If there's a clear, directed way to elicit the students' views about what they think should be done about some of these questions, what they think would serve them well. And another class of people is the part-time instructors, to do some directed outreach to elicit their views and have those bodies of people included in the process.
Yeah, great points, Jill. Actually, interestingly enough, the idea behind these conversations was not necessarily to exclude any population. So we have not necessarily promoted these to students, but I think that is certainly a possibility. And I know Pam, Arlene, and I have had conversations about ongoing student voice conversations over the next few months, because we're going to need that to do that because of the vaccine mandate and the number of changes, but to be able to elicit. I think what I think is important is it's not just about what our current students need, but also about what may attract others to the institution. But they do come with a perspective. And in fact, we've done in the past some focus groups with students in particular academic programs to see whether or not they'd be interested in taking courses with a particular institution. And in fact, I think that's how we've built some of those agreements with four-year schools in the past, where we've rented out space and had expanded programs where students could stay right on the Bedford or the Lowell campus. I think we've done it mostly in Bedford, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the academic programs. But eliciting those kind of that feedback from students is important, and I think through conversations and perhaps also through some surveys. And I think I don't know if Deb Bacher is on, but we can certainly circle back with Deb. She's made great connections with and done great work around sort of our connector with our part-time faculty, and they are always welcome in these conversations, as they are welcome in professional day. And so we have had great participation over the course of the summer and into these months in that professional day for part-time faculty. I think they've gotten accustomed, Jill, to sort of showing up if they can to these kinds of conversations, but I think we need to do some directed outreach, and I can ask Deb to do that, not only through the website, but also in a communication out to them to let them know that they're welcome in these conversations. They come with a lot of external experience. They've worked at a number of other institutions. I think they have some good connections that we should be able to exploit as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phil, Sally.
Hi, Sally.
I just wanted to sort of get on top of what Jill's saying. And I think one of the things I think is if you do some of these focus groups within disciplines, you know, strategically pick different disciplines, because I like in a particular class, like with my classes, I think those students, when they get together, their synergistic relationship in terms of the discipline and the majors that they have, that they can offer suggestions that if they were in a heterogeneous group would not be as present. I mean, I think that, you know, we could work out, I think it's important. I think we need, and even though they're students who are currently, they also can say what they think coming into the college would have made a difference for them. So I think they're an important voice, but I think we need to do it more directed to discipline, and so that we get to see them in the context of their discipline and their major rather than a generic reaching out to them.
Yeah, and I think
my 2 cents.
I think it's a great idea, Sally, and I think I would turn to yourself and Jill and Joanna and FSA to talk about how we can best structure those focus groups, because I'll tell you, we've had significant challenges in the past bringing even small groups of students together. I mean, and I just want to recognize and thank Trustee Cheryl Howard. Dr. Howard is here with us today listening in on the conversation. And I mean, I remember trying to sort of create small focus groups to really address issues of equity on campus. And it is, I mean, we've offered dinner, we've offered gift cards. I think we have to be strategic about this. And I really need faculty partnership in order to pull that off.
I would like to offer the SOTL 100 more faculty as your faculty partners, because they have worked, and we have almost 50 faculty on like 25 different disciplines. So they're a core group of stakeholders at the college that could be used as a resource for something like this.
And Sally, could you say a little more about your thoughts about, like, give me an example from a disciplinary point of view? Is it to sort of get a better sense of where they're going to transfer? What are the four-year schools they're interested in? What would they like to see on campus for the use of facilities? What's your thoughts around the focus groups?
Well, I just think if you put together a group, let's say, of STEM majors, I think there's something that together, first of all, if they were in a class, they already have a background of relatedness, so they're comfortable with each other,
right?
And they can talk about that. They can I mean, I don't know what will come out of it. I mean, that's the purpose of a focus group, is to sort of see what gets uncovered. But I think we could structure the questions and whatever we want to talk about. I mean, and just, you know, their discipline, or what we could do, provide them what going forward in their discipline, or what what they have been challenges for them. And I think that would give us the whole idea of what Holly's talking about, on-campus resources for them. So that's like a very powerful way to get the ones, and I just think discipline's important. I mean, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do the other. I just think there's something in a discipline when you put them together that their communications feed off of each other. And then they get creative, where if you put them in a generic group, that doesn't generally happen.
No, it's a great idea, Sally. And, you know, please invite me to a future social meeting, and maybe we can talk through how we might be able to structure this. And I think we have to figure out how we don't impact classroom time, but at the same time, it's the best time to capture some of these students and ask some of these questions. And I want to be respectful of the time that everybody needs to plan for academics, but at the same time, we're kind of at a crucial point where getting some of this input is going to be really important for planning purposes. So I appreciate your willingness to work with me and the other members of the administration, and maybe we could partner with individual faculty and administrators to develop these focus groups.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi, Joanna Delmonico, Math Department. I didn't introduce myself the first time.
You're such an unknown. It's hard.
But I do want to say, first of all, thank you. I was actually afraid to come to this meeting. Oh,
why?
What are we going to discuss? What is it going to be?
No, people are scared about conversations, aren't they?
No, but I mean, who knows what could have come up? Anyway, so I think, no, I'm kidding. But I just want to support everybody who's put out ideas. They've all been fantastic. I really wanted to kind of jump on Hallie's idea, like that, to me, a study hub. All I can envision in my head is like grabbing one of the ramp-up rooms and being able to personally staff it a couple of days a week where I can say, oh, this is how you upload documents. Oh, this is what you should do if this is your, oh, wait, you want to know how to solve a math problem? Yeah, we could do that. And how about that? Like, I would want to be that doing everything in a room for a little while with a bunch of students and kind of give them that opportunity to see a faculty member maybe in a different light. I used to often have all of my advisees, I'd invite them on a Friday morning or Friday afternoon. Yeah, come to my office. We'll just do one big engineering advising session. And I didn't have to do anything. They tell each other what to do and what they're doing and what I'm doing and what I did. And it is that genesis, that energy that gets them going. And Sally brings up the good point too about the different disciplines. Sure, there's different things. I know that as many students want online, a lot of them will go, oh, math online, I want to be in class. So kind of encouraging them to make sure they give those opinions about specific courses that they want to see in specific ways and how we can best build the schedule around that. I know that's the next conversation, but it all tie in. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the structure of how we do this, I think there's a variety of ways of not only getting focus group. I mean, information doesn't have to come from a formal focus group. We get a lot of really solid information from students who are clustered in the Multicultural Center, in the Anna Peasy Center, in the Veteran Center. I mean, we have those become hubs and hangouts along with the kind of study hub that you're talking about. We have captive audiences of students that are in the library all the time. The librarians will tell you. So easy enough to use those opportunities to ask a few pointed questions of students and being able to use it. Because I think we have to capture them when they're here on campus and when we have access to them, because any other time that we've tried to structure anything outside of that is very challenging for their schedules, no matter what we offer them. So that's the challenge.
Marilyn?
Thanks, Beth. Hi, Phil. Hi, everybody. It's Marilyn
Hi,
Glazer
Marilyn.
Weisner, Director of the Intensive English Institute and the World Language Institute. So, Phil, what you were talking about earlier in the conversation is very exciting about inviting partnerships with UMass Lowell and smaller private colleges who want to share with us and be with us on campus. We have something they need. They need international students who can communicate in English. So they need our Intensive English Institute to prepare them for Middlesex and then to go to their school. So there's a beautiful hook.
And I think, the other thing that you need to understand is that, as I've told you many, many times, if people will avoid using a deficit lens, if we can embrace the fact that we are incredibly fortunate that 45% of our students are students of color. They come from a variety of countries, backgrounds. They are a source of tremendous wealth, not only to our own experience here at the institution, but they are very sought after at private and public institutions who are trying to diversify their programs. I know when we had William James here, they were very laser focused about his interest. The president was here and he talked about the issue of how we need to serve these communities from a mental health perspective. And if we don't get students into the pipeline to be able to do that, and how do those students get started? Well, they get started oftentimes at a community college in a psychology major or a human services major. And then they just need guidance and scholarship and support to be able to do that. So, Marilyn, you're right. This idea of the public-private partnership is one that's really important. And I think what it does on top of that, it challenges our other partners like UML and others who are less accepting of significant numbers of credits, who have not established transfer scholarships specifically for our students in other high demand areas. I just had this conversation with Joe Hartman and Julie Chen the other day, is this idea of, there are Riverhawk scholarships over at the university, but none of that has been focused on transfer students. And how do we use that to create a bridge for students who want to go on and continue their education? So I think the privates have figured out how they can lure these students in a better way. And what they have to offer oftentimes is a better deal for our students than what the public universities have. And at this stage of the game, we're going to work with and partner with whoever is going to be able to best serve our students.
We have a lot of support in the chat for surveying current students and potential new students. All of your ideas and suggestions will be extracted from the chat and will go to Phil and senior leadership. So please feel free to continue adding things there. It is 3:27. So there is still time if you would like to raise your hand and offer up a suggestion or put something in chat. Phil will be happy to address it.
I want to thank you for the robust conversation, both vocally, we can all hear verbally, but also in the chat. As you know, I'm really not good at monitoring both. So Beth, thank you so much for your assistance in this. And we do capture all those comments and we've been able to use them. It's great to get those lists and reports after these sessions that have been recorded. So Alexandra?
Hi, everybody. I'm looking at your faces over here, so that's why you're seeing the side of my face. But I just wanted to share, I think that I guess to totally change gears and not to take away from the really rich excitement and just energy I'm getting through Zoom right now. But something that I would love that I feel like that might be welcome downtown would be this idea of leveraging the space that we have with the cafeteria as like an incubator space for like pop-up catering businesses or aspiring restaurateurs. And I think that another community partnership that we could look into to find leads for that would be, our own entrepreneur program here. I'm sure that we have lots of participants who are interested in doing food startups, and also E4All down the street. I feel like there's other program models that we could look to for not just commercial kitchens, but also a space where we could work out a calendar where we could have like a growing food service business, maybe reserve a day or a week in the kitchen where they could come in and produce things and test it and have like a rotating test kitchen. We're really fortunate downtown in that we have options for places to eat, but I feel like there's always someone new trying to sell something out of their house or on the weekends. And I think that would be an opportunity there for us to kind of bring more people to the community to look at us as a source for who's the new up and coming food business. And I don't know if that model would necessarily be really successful or helpful in Bedford, but it was a thought that I had about how we could really just use the space and get some more traffic on campus. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, Alexander. I know we've talked about, Colleen's tried to get food trucks onto the Bedford campus. We've tried to get vending machines. They are also behind in the supply chain. So you can't even get vending machines that will deliver sandwiches to students. So it's just a huge challenge. But I think we have to think through sort of the business model about how that works with the kitchens. Those who work in culinary know more about the liabilities that come with, but there are always ways to make those kinds of things happen. You have to make sure that those people have food service and food service licenses. So, but I think that there's a way to sort of create a template to consider that. I think what's really important is to understand that there's something good and something creative that can come from not having a traditional vendor here as a food service. Like, imagine if we could have a Chipotle. That would, we could probably make a lot of money on either campus. So, we may have to look at some private sort of opportunities here as well. But I think these kinds of creative ideas are the kind of ideas that we need to explore. Not every single one of them is going to work, and some of them will come with some specific challenges. But I think that's a great kind of opportunity and what we may be able to do. So I know. It's funny, Judy and Kim, it's so funny that we are here having a conversation. I just laugh about it. The fact that we've struggled all along to find a viable and available kitchen. And here we are with two of our own empty kitchens and what that could mean not only to our own culinary program, but to entrepreneurship as well. So I know that Judy and others are listening in, but that's a great idea. And one that we'll have to take into consideration and see what the challenges would be.
Jan?
Hey, thanks. I wanted to jump in with some thoughts about the discussion about student feedback, partnerships, right? We have and spaces on campus where students can support each other. So in the design department, we do get a lot of feedback, and a lot of it comes from students who are working in the Mac lab, right? Which is probably I think, generated our the most sort of opportunities for student success in our program. Students are working collaboratively with professional tutors, or supporting each other. and those students are doing very well. Many students transfer to UMass Lowell because it's familiar. We hear uniformly that students are not happy at UMass Lowell with the design department there. And I think that's really important for us to hear that kind of information, right, from students.
Correct.
So that led to us establishing a transfer pipeline to Leslie College of Art and Design,
right,
where students are very happy. And Leslie now offers a dedicated scholarship for our students who transfer to Leslie. So this feedback loop, you know, kind of has allowed us to create a much, I think, stronger transfer pathway for our students, right?
Yeah.
And we would not have heard about the unhappiness with UMass Lowell. We would not have reached out to Leslie, you know, if we had not gotten that feedback from students working in the lab.
Yeah. No,
Right.
that's a great example, Jen. And you know what that triggers for me is the fact that when we think about these partnerships, it doesn't mean that Leslie have to come down and offer classes at night on our campus, but it could mean that if we had a cohort of students from your particular program and they wanted to transfer to Leslie, we might be able to convince Leslie to do one of their courses on site so that students got a chance to work with a Leslie faculty member and learn about that. So I think that when we think about those kind of partnerships, we think about like somebody setting up an entire shop and running a whole series of programs. There may be other ways to think about creating that bridge to some of these private institutions that are in many ways better for our students. So I think that's an exciting it's an exciting conversation. And I think a lot of programs have been talking about how do they do this to meet students' needs. And oftentimes they find that the university down the street is not as friendly. But I think what's important is it's a dual attack. We have to sort of work with the privates, but we have to be clear with the university about why it is our students aren't necessarily accessing their programs. We've had a lot of very candid conversations with their leadership about why they are not necessarily the first choice, why sometimes our students find the institution not as transfer friendly as others. So I think those are important messages for our partners to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Judy.
Hi there, just to bring you all up to speed on the use of our kitchens for our culinary program. We did bring in our culinary arts faculty to view the kitchen spaces, and unfortunately, they're just not designed as teaching kitchens. So that posed some issues, and they felt we were better off. We're currently in the UTech teaching kitchens, and that just continues to be a better alternative. We have had restaurateurs who have expressed an interest, and we've talked with them about that. There's a huge liability to the college, and basically the decision was it didn't benefit us from that respect. With regard to insurance, but we do continue to sort of try and think creatively about those kitchen spaces. The other issue with restaurateurs expanding, if they have a current location, expanding into a new location, is the fact that they just can't find help. We have restaurateurs who come to us all the time who are desperate for our students because they're having such difficulty in finding wait staff, both front of the house and back of the house personnel, but we certainly continue to try and think creatively about those spaces.
Yeah, and Judy, I think we're very fortunate that Kathy Platt is our trustee, one of our trustees. She's very engaged at the state level in the National Restaurant Association. And I think she has expressed multiple times the challenges for local restaurants to be able to find help. So we understand there's a complicated dynamic to this, but I think you're right. You remind me, Judy, that we have explored this multiple times about those not being very effective teaching spaces. And so that is part of the challenge. And then I guess maybe the question may be, and I don't know whether we've ever circled back with you and Kim about, so if we were to make changes to those spaces, what would those changes be if they were going to be effective teaching spaces? Because I think the time is now when there's nobody in there with no contract, that it would be worth exploring whether there are simple changes that we could make that could make a more teaching friendly sort of environment. It's worth a shot.
We'll definitely follow up with that. I think the Bedford kitchen facility poses more of an opportunity. than Lowell. I think the build out or expansion to that space to make it a teaching facility would be very costly, but I think Bedford has more opportunity in that direction. So we'll definitely follow up with those discussions.
Yeah, but I think as capital skills money becomes available from the state, and as we, have this conversation, as Judy and others have mentioned about a culinary arts training space, maybe that's the next thing we need to sort of explore, is how do we renovate one of those kitchens to become a teaching space? Because if we can find a way to not only create a teaching space and to really benefit our students, but to get students involved in the actual business aspect of, I'm not suggesting running a cafeteria, but finding a way to really develop even some limited food options for our students, that would be terrific during this time of not being able to find a vendor. Anyone else? It's funny. I can't believe that it's 3:38. This has gone by in a flash. Joanna said she was afraid, and I understand. I have to be honest with you. I'm always afraid when we just sort of open it up to 121 people to say what they want. But I don't think we're going to be able to move forward as an institution if we don't really creatively find ways to tap into your ideas. Many of you have worked here for a number of years. You've seen things come and go. You've worked at other institutions. You come from other colleges. You bring a wealth of experience in partnerships with the community. And all of that is invaluable. There is no potential idea that's off the table at this point. I think we have to be able to think about ways that we're going to use our facilities that are going to benefit us, our students, and then figure out how do we make more efficient use of the space. And all of the ideas that you've presented today are really some exceptional ones for us to explore. And I really look forward to getting the report. And Beth, my assumption is that once we complete and get a printed copy of this report from the chat, we can then share that with the college community. Is that correct?
Sure.
Yeah. And that way people who were not able to participate today can either watch the recording or just read the various ideas from the chat, because these have been, people are writing madly. Is there anyone that put anything in the chat that we didn't address, that somehow you feel like you were being shy? You put it in the chat, we didn't capture it, Beth didn't capture it in time, because there's been a lot of great ideas. Is there anything we missed?
Vocational trades like cosmetology and massage therapists.
Oh, I have to tell you that one of the saddest things when I left Cape Cod Community College, even though I was coming to this amazing institution, was I left the massage therapy program behind. And I would go, I would go every Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock. And the students were incredible, professional. On the Cape, it was a major source to many of the spas, et cetera, that were available. It was a very viable. And Eileen, I don't even know if the program still existed by the time that you left. I'm not sure.
No,
but,
by the time I arrived, it wasn't there. So
someone
in
so
between.
sad.
Yeah.
So sad. But I think that I think that the idea of exploring some of those programs, they do require designated space, but I can think about sort of the opportunities where we have a couple of really successful programs on our Bedford campus that have that kind of space that could be renovated for that purpose. We'll have to look at into the accreditation component. I know we've talked about a couple of times specifically massage therapy, which tends to be a little more of an expensive program. But again, there's nothing that we can't say we can't. I don't know what the demand would be. We need industry demand. We need to know exactly whether or not going through the expense of redesigning and developing a program is going to meet all our criteria. And basically, we wouldn't be able to get the program approved by the Department of Higher Ed without that demand. But there's nothing wrong with exploratory ideas in those areas. What I would say that I think would be interesting is down the street or around the corner from Lowell is that there are a couple of sort of cosmetology schools. Are there not in Lowell? Tiffany's nodding her head, so I think that she's probably seen the same. So, I mean, I would wonder if there's some opportunity for us to partner with those cosmetology schools to develop, like, how do you add an entrepreneurship certificate? Maybe we could develop entrepreneurship courses right there with the cosmetology school. A lot of those folks are going to not only go out and work for another in a spa or in a hairdresser or whatever, but they're also going to start their own businesses. So I'm wondering about a connection between some of those cosmetology schools and the concept of entrepreneurship.
We've funded through the many entrepreneurship grants that we've received. We have funded businesses like that. And then they've gone out and of course they've procured space in other places. And that's when those types of spaces were at a premium. So the rates were very expensive. There's a glut of commercial space on the market right now due to COVID. But that's not to say that we still couldn't entertain partnerships, you know, some type of collaboration with those types of operations.
Phil, Ann Buskey has brought up life coach training. Wendy Kajikian talked about Reiki training or certification. And Donna Corbin had her hand raised.
I'm going to tell you that I think Judy Burke may be able to speak to this. I think some of that training actually happens in our non-credit arena, and I don't know how successful it is, and I don't know what those programs are, but they're both possibilities for exploration. But I'm gonna take you back. I know we've strayed a little bit. I want you to save those ideas for next month, because we're going to talk about academic programs and the college schedule. But I mean, I told you these things between facilities and academic programs are going to bleed over. But there's some very good ideas for us to do some research, and I know Arlene and the deans will get this list, and we'll begin to have some conversation about what the process is and for accreditation, and what's the process for licensing, et cetera. Donna?
I don't know. I just wanted to say that the two places for cosmetology downtown have both closed due to COVID and construction. So they've been having a tough time.
Yeah. I've seen, you know, I know there's one that when I walk over to the campus from my home and I go by it, but I never see the activity. So now, Donna, you've explained why I'm not seeing any activity out of that school. Sally?
Yeah, I'm looking at a timeline. What's your timeline in this whole thing? Like, you know, is this open-ended for the whole year, or, you know, when are we going to enact? I'm thinking in terms of the focus groups. Do we need to get them started for the rest of the semester? Can we do them next semester? Like, what's your timeline?
My timeline, because you're partnering with us, is your timeline. So you and Jill should discuss when it may be best that we can do some follow-up with your SOTL group. Willing to come and happy to come to any meeting in the future to figure out how we might enact some of those. I think, you know, there is a rhythm to the academic calendar and the schedule. You all know it better than I do in many ways about when students are accessible and available and open to these kinds of conversations, plus what your demands are in the classroom. So you might find that in a particular discipline, it's easier to do this in November, or I mean, I'm open to it, but I think we've got.
In terms of putting changes in, what are you looking at? Are you looking at, is it like a revolving?
The next 5 to 10 years, as long as I'm president, Sally, we'll be having open conversations about changes.
Okay, good.
I mean, no, I don't mean to be
by the
funny.
spring. You don't want it by the spring. Okay.
I'm not trying to be funny with you, but some of these things are going to take a very long time. Some of these things really require relationship building, which we've already started to do. So, but I think what's important is, for a while, I think people felt that there was no place for their ideas. There was no place to really have open dialogue about things. And, you know, the idea behind these critical conversations is to drive the point home that we have physical facilities and we have to learn to be as efficient with them as we possibly can in order for the college to have a future. That doesn't mean that one campus doesn't exist or another doesn't exist, but the idea of what we use our physical facilities for, the idea that we have to get beyond this idea that I only can use particular spaces, the fact that we may be sharing spaces with public and private institutions. So I think this is really to open up our thinking and really to have some conversations, and to say that we are open to a number of areas that are central to, and I think some of these ideas are more central to our mission than others. Some of these ideas may be more revenue generating, some of them may be more relationship generating, but at the same time, I think it's given us an opportunity to talk about, there are about 78 different new ideas that I heard today. I've clustered them together in my own notes. And I think there are some that will be very low hanging fruit that we can explore right away, whether we discuss it in cabinet or we immediately work with our lead in the academic deans and push some of those conversations down. But some of them I think are going to take a little time and research to develop. But I think what's most important is we can lay the foundation for some of the things that you all have mentioned about getting part-timers involved and getting student voice in all of this. And I think that's something we can enact as soon as you feel like the Stoll Group is ready to make that happen.
Well, and I just see it as organic. I mean, it's sort of like it'll evolve over time. So I
Correct.
All right, so that's great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's a never-ending journey, Sally. Anything else?
Nothing else in the chat, Phil.
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to apologize to Jill and Sally again for co-opting their SOTL time. It is not my intent, but we are always going to have conflicts in this, and I think we've shared some dates around these. I really wanted to get these critical conversations on the table because so much of this has to be part of action steps that get built into the college's strategic plan as well. As you know, we've identified some strategic directions that have been approved by the Board of Trustees, but hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be going back to the Department of Higher Ed with a fully fledged plan. And on there will be a number of activities. And some of those activities are going to have to be about the efficiency of the use of space and the planning about what our academic calendar looks like. And all of this has to be done, obviously, with an equity lens. So I think these conversations monthly are going to be really important. We could have never accomplished this at an FSA meeting. So the fact that we're taking additional time and the fact that you've all volunteered to come and be part of that time is very meaningful and it's important to the institution. I want to thank you all for your input. Our next one, Donna, our next one is what, December 14th? Is that correct? I don't know, Beth may have them too. We would throw the critical conversation slide up again, Beth, maybe if you still have it. I can look on my calendar, but I don't. We'll remind you. There we go. Yeah, it is December 14th. We're going to talk a little bit more as identified in our strategic plan about what guided pathways means at the institution and how we can be more purposeful about those pathways. And that will include some of the conversations we had today about public and private transfer, and also our work with the high schools. But more importantly, sort of what does the academic schedule look like going forward? And we are really doing everything we can to listen to students' needs and faculty needs, but we have seen a tremendous return thanks to all of your hard work to campus, both in hybrid and in fully face-to-face classes. So next conversation will be December 14th. And again, I am very grateful for your time, your energy, your ideas as we start to build some of the things that have to happen at Middlesex in order for us to be successful in the future. I'm very grateful for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much.